Good evening, councillors, elected members, members of the public, and of course, council officers. My name is Mark de Haast. I'm the Group Manager Corporate Services, and it's my pleasure to take you through tonight's workshop. So, in support tonight, I have Vicky Silk. To my left, Vicky is our Rates Manager. To the left of Vicky is Tanika Mason. Tanika is our Democracy Services Officer, who's making the tonight's meeting possible, is controlling the live streaming and making sure that we're able to live stream as well. And then outside we have Jane Knock, who's just on crowd control. So if any members of the public are still coming through, Jane will make sure they can come in and that we have the social distancing as it should be. And we may be joined by our Chief Executive, Mr. Wayne Maxwell. So before we start, just a bit of housekeeping. If you do need to use our toilet facilities, they are through the double doors across the hallway. You'll find our toilet facilities. If we do have an earthquake, please drop, cover, and hold. Wait for further instruction. If we do need to leave and it's safe to do so, please follow the instructions from staff. We'll take you out of the building to our designated safety spots. If we do need to leave the building for any other purposes, please remain calm and please follow instructions from staff. Again, we'll exit you from the building in a safe, orderly manner to our safe exit points. So, for tonight's presentation, this is workshop 3 of the 3 series. On Monday night, we took you through Financial Awareness 101, which was setting out Council's financial performance and position. On Tuesday night, last night, we took you through our Treasury Management procedure and policy. And of course, tonight is taking you through this Council's rating system, which is effectively our rates and how it works. Please do ask questions as we go. No point in waiting right till the end. So if I could ask, because we are live streaming, could you please use your microphones and speak into your microphones? For those viewers that are live streaming, if you don't use your microphone, they simply can't hear you. You'll notice in terms of my microphone, it's got a red light. So when the microphones are red, it means you're live. When they're green, it means you're not live. So if you do engage the microphone button, you press it once, it'll light up, you speak, and when you finish speaking, you disengage the button. And then if you've got a green light, that'll then go red, and then please do speak. So without further ado, we'll get straight into it. So our rating system. So we'll just kick off with a little bit of the framework. So rates are effectively a charge against the property, which is set by territorial local authorities, and they are set to recover the net expenditure of the services that councils deliver. There is a rigid framework in terms of setting rates, and our rates are set in accordance with the Local Government Rating Act. So our annual and long-term plan process. So councils set, every 3 years, councils will determine and set a long-term plan. This council's long-term plan has a 20-year window, but under the Local Government Act, we revise our long-term plan every 3 years. Once we've done a long-term plan, in years 2 and 3 of the long-term plan, we do what's called an annual plan. So through these processes, we determine with the councillors what are the levels of service that the council is going to provide, what are the fees and charges, and what are the ultimate costs of those services. We look at alternate sources of revenue. So, for example, we would look at fees and charges. So the council will set the fees and charges that, for example, swimming pool fees, resource consents, building consents, dog registration fees, etc., etc. So that's quite a lengthy process. So we go through, first of all, we establish what all our expenses are. We look at our alternate revenue streams, and then the net cost of delivering those services needs to be funded through rates. So that determines what the annual rates revenue is for the year. Now, in terms, if we break down our our total revenue. So this council is heavily dependent on its rates revenue. 75% of our rates revenue for the last financial year, 2019-20, was from rates. 1/4 of our total revenue is from fees and charges, grants and subsidies, and financial and development contributions. So the slide behind me, so please do feel free to move around if you can't quite see. We have 2 TVs at the back and the big screens behind me. So what I'm just showing you here is our average rates increase. So what we can see for the 2021 year, so for our current annual plan, our average rates increase was 2.6%. Now, if we break that down as what is actually driving that 2.6%, so you can see in the black bar that 2% of the rates increase is from additional depreciation. So every year the council has a capital works program, which is effectively investing in either new assets or it's renewing and replacing existing assets. When those assets have been completed, commissioned and put into use, we then, what we call is, we depreciate those assets. So in other words, what that means is we spread the cost of that asset over its useful economic life. That is how we achieve intergenerational equity, which is making sure that ratepayers pay for their share and only their fair share of the assets that they consume. So so how it works, put simplistically, this year there is a $38 million capital works program. So we'll spend most of the year building and developing those assets. Those will only come into play the following year, and that's when we start to depreciate. So the cost to the ratepayers of those assets this year is really just interest on the borrowings, and when they're in use, when they're being utilised, the following year you start to have the depreciation. So every single year, without doing anything, because we always have a capital works program, because we're investing in new assets, because we're retaining or renewing assets, we're always going to have an increase in our depreciation. So as you can see on the slide, 2% of this year's rates increase is the result of additional depreciation, and 0.6% is just increased costs. Welcome, Wayne. So some of you might be familiar in terms of some changes in the Local Government Act now requires us to produce consultation documents if we're consulting with the community. So in terms of our long-term plan, we produce consultation documents. They're required to be written in plain English. They are required to be simple and to the point, and clearly set out what we're consulting on, what options do the ratepayers have. It's a yes or it's a no or it's a consideration. So what we've always done in terms of our consultation documents, we always include what we call rating examples. So the screen behind me, so typically what we do is we set out, so when we're consulting on a proposed rates increase, what we do is we set out some examples. We show what the impact will be on residential properties by ward. We also show the impact of a rural property as well as the impact on our commercial rates. Now, most importantly, what we do show is we actually just show the median property value for residential properties in each ward, the median property value of a rural property in the district, and the median property value of a commercial property. So what we'll come to a little bit later in the presentation, in terms of our rates, they are actually, we have rates that are levied on capital value. So the capital value of a property is the land value plus the improvements on that land. We levy our rates by land value, by capital value. We have fixed charges per rating unit. For our water, as you know, we have a variable charge, which is a rate which is a cost per 1,000 litres of water. So what we try and set out is we set out using the median property values. For example, Paikakariki has a median land value of $285,000, and the median capital value is $540,000. So we show, well, what are the current full year rates on that property, and what would be the full year rates on that property if there was an average rates increase of 2.6%, for example. And it breaks down to what's the increase per year, what's the increase per week, and what's the percentage increase. So our rates are a blunt tool. So effectively, we work out what are the total costs, what are our total costs to deliver our services, what are our alternate revenue streams, and the difference is what we need to recover by rates. And when we say we have an average rates increase, effectively what that is, it's comparing the total rates revenue requirement from 1 year, what is the total rates revenue requirement for the following year compared to the total rates revenue requirement of the current year, less forecast growth. So that's the average rates increase. So we remove growth. So for existing ratepayers, what is their likely rates increase going to be year on year? But when you put it into I'll call it the rates machine, because our rating system is rates, we set a rate in the dollar of land value, a rate in the dollar of capital value, you've got fixed charges. When you put it through the machine and you actually apply it to individual properties, the percentages can be quite different. So that's why we provide these examples in our consultation documents, and then in our annual plan document and our long-term plan document, within our rating policy, we actually set out a number of examples by ward, residential property. So we don't just show the median property value, we show the median, lower, higher, so that ratepayers can actually see what is the indicative rates increase for that property going to be. In addition to that, when we're consulting, we actually have an online rates calculator. So members of the public can go into our website, they can type in their property address, and it'll show them what is the impact of the rates increase going to be on that particular property. I think we have a question. Yes, Bernie?
Yeah, the question is, what do the majority of local authorities in New Zealand base their rates on? Capital value, land value, or the same mixture of as us?
Yeah, it is very variable, Councillor Randall. So Lower Hutt, for example, is predominantly on capital value, but within the region you do have that mix. You have the fixed charges, land value and capital value. Some councils that were heavily weighted towards capital value are now shifting towards land value. So it really depends on, under legislation, we need to review our rating system every 3 years, and the reason why we do that is we have to make sure that it is true and fair for our own communities. So each council is very much guided by its own communities. We do that rating system review, we do affordability reviews, but it's very much determined by the communities. Dale, I'll come back to you. I'm just going to go to Guy first.
On the slide here, you've got it broken down to wards, and each ward has different percentage increases. So within a ward, is the percentage increase the same, or within the ward are there also different variations?
So pretty much it will vary based on the different land or capital values of each property. I mean, that determines how much of a share that each property will contribute. So while we try to give a range of examples to try and cover those lower or higher value properties, every single property is different, and therefore the percentage increase will also be different.
So does that mean in the ward, every house has a different percentage increase?
Exactly, unless every single property, unless each property has the same portion of land to capital value. That's correct, yes.
So just to add to what Vicky was saying, so later on in the presentation I'll talk to you about district-wide valuations, which is effectively where rating units are revalued, so your capital value may go up or down. And so what Vicky is saying, so for example, if we chose Waikanae, our rating system is levied on land value, capital value, and then you've got your fixed charges. So within a ward, your land value and your capital values are going to go up and down, and that's determined by the district-wide valuation. And when they do the district-wide valuation every 3 years, they take into account a number of factors. It's desktop reviews, it's sales prices in that area. So that's why every 3 years we do a district-wide revaluation. An important point there, it's not the council doing it, it's actually the valuer general. So it's an independent process. So I think what Vicky is saying is, so if we took Waikanae, for example, every property in Waikanae that has got exactly the same capital value will be paying the same rates.
Assuming they also have the same land value.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very important to establish exactly. So if you had two properties that had the same land value, the same capital value, they would be paying the same rates. But as Vicky's saying, within a street you can have properties that have different land values, different capital values, because all properties are subtly different.
Just to use that to carry it further, for the whole district, so if everyone had the same land value, capital value throughout the whole district, it'll be the same increase, correct? Well, not correct.
Probably the only other variation is we also have the local community rates, which are different for each area. So that would be the only other variable, I guess, to take into consideration. So your Otaki local community rate has a different revenue requirement to, say, your Waikanae community rate. So
What is the community rate, sorry?
So that's for local initiatives. Yep. That's right.
Yeah, so in simplistic terms, so each ward has a community rate, and that covers the costs of the community board, plus the discretionary grants that the community board has, and they do vary. So the Waikanae's discretionary grants are different to Parapara Umu Raumeri ward. Again, those rates are set. It's a rate in the dollar capital value, but you've got a different the budgeted amount for the Parapara Umu Raumeri community rate is different to the Waikanae. So you're taking that total amount and you're creating a rate in the dollar capital value. So there are different amounts. So even if you had land value and capital value the same, then you've got a different community rate coming through. So what is constant is the fixed charge per rating unit. Sure. So quite often Paikakariki has very high land value because they have generally speaking they've got larger sections, and they don't pay a wastewater rate because they've got septic tanks. So because they've got larger sections to accommodate the septic tanks, they've got higher land value, so they pay generally. They'll pay more in the district-wide general rate because it's levied by land value.
When you look at a rates increase, that is the same for every ward in the district. So let's say the roading rate is going up by $10. Because Paikakariki rates are lower, the percentage increase of a $10 applied to everyone will appear as a higher percentage for Paikakariki. So Paikakariki residents regularly say that's unfair, our rates increase is a higher percentage than, say, Parapara Umu, but in fact their rates are lower anyway because they're not paying a wastewater charge, and so percentages can be a little bit misleading when you're actually all paid the same $10 increase. So you do have to look at what's the detail behind that.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you. I had this comment said to me regularly by the residents of Manly Street, where you've got one house which is really worth 2 or 3 million, and you've got one house which is maybe worth 800, and he's paying the same type of rates. Now, it seems quite fair, not fair, in the sense if you look across the road, they're paying half the rates. So Do you not think that the rating system should change and get more up to date with regards to overall, rating system?
So I'll answer part of that question. So we do review the rating system every 3 years. We do extensive affordability studies, which goes down to the lowest level by mesh block. So we do have a look at that. We understand the affordability issues and challenges of the entire district, and we do look at the rating mechanisms. We do look at what is the impact that fixed charges are having on particular property values. What we have been saying for certainly the last sort of 5-6 years is when we do our rating system review, so part of our rating system was very regressive, which means that so the fixed charges, if you looked at our total rates revenue requirement, what's derived by way of fixed charges was quite high. And so what that means is where you've got a, say for example, a low property value in Otaki, they'd be, in terms of fixed charges, they'll be paying the same rates as a very, very high property value in Waikanae. So we have looked at our mechanisms and we've assessed, we've had a close look at that with the affordability study to say, is that right? Should some of our rating mechanisms be changed? Should some of our fixed charges, is it fairer to actually charge that on land value or capital value? And we have made some changes over the last 6 years because we are required to constantly review our rating system to make sure that it is as fair as it possibly can be for the community.
Can you tell me also, why isn't the water rates put into the general rating system?
So the Craig Committee were tasked before water meters were introduced with coming up with the system for charging water rates, and their proposal was for the system that we currently have, which is a split 50 to 55% between a fixed and volumetric charge. So that is charged through a separate account. That was also reviewed, if memory serves me, 2 years after 2016, and the Craig Committee came together again. And so the Craig Committee was made up with representatives across the district. I think from memory there was representatives from the business community, from tenants, from landlords, that type of thing. So it was a good cross-section of the community. And their recommendation was to continue with the current charging system.
That's an issue which has been brought up regularly now. You know the situation is down in some areas where you've got a lower undeveloped property or house or whatever it is, and they can't pay the amount of rates. So, basically the rating system is going to continue going up. It's going to push them out of the area. I think it needs to be, there's obviously incentive there within the rating system of giving some type of incentive. If the rates are paid, something comes off their rating system. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So are you talking about undeveloped land or? So, there are some, council also has some initiatives, as do the central government. The rates rebate is...
I'm talking about giving incentives, more of an incentive for the elderly people who can't afford to pay their rates.
So thank you, Dale. So in terms of this council has quite substantial rates remissions. We also have quite a substantial rates assistance program. So I'm just going to keep going. Happy to take your questions offline, or we won't get through the presentation. So, but happy to chat to you offline. I think just for the benefit of everyone in the room and for our viewers, we do our rating system reviews. We've reviewed it over the last 6 years, and as Vicky has said, we do have 9 different types of rates remissions, rate remission policies, and included in that is rates assistance that is available to ratepayers subject to eligibility criteria.
Can I just add a comment? we don't disagree that rates isn't a very nice tool to use. It's all we're allowed to use. And there were a significant number of submissions to the Productivity Commission last year about why can't we be given different funding tools that more reflect ability to pay, so how much you earn rather than what the value of your assets is. Sadly, the Productivity Commission came back and said, you have all the tools you need, you just need to use them differently. Just charge more different rates. So I think there needs to be more of a groundswell of public response to those approaches. Talking to the government of the day, whenever they want to do this stuff, to point out that not everybody would agree with that. We don't agree with it. We submitted against it, and we submitted that there should be some other mechanisms provided, but unfortunately they weren't agreed with. So it's not that we disagree with you. We're trying to make the best and fairest use of the tools that we do have for our community.
It needs to be valued on population eating, because you've got more elderly people settling here. And also you've got the retirement villages not paying the amount of rates as we all pay.
Okay, thank you, Dale. We'll just keep moving forward. Please do ask questions as we go, but some of them we'll just need to take offline just so that we can get through the presentation.
Could I just ask a question, please? I've had the button pushed for quite a while now. This is just a query about the revision of the rating system. Who actually does it? Is it council officers? And who makes the decision?
Thank you for your question. So council officers do review the rating system. We use external expertise to undertake the affordability review, but the council officers with the expertise that use our rating system every day recommend changes, if any, and the decision is made by the council.
Okay, that's me. So we've probably actually talked about a lot of what's in the next slides, but pretty much where we're up to now is that we've gone through a consultation process for the annual and long-term plan, and decision has been made about what the rates requirement is for the coming year. So from a practical sense, once my team has that number, we use that to effectively divide it across all the properties in the district. So the practicalities of that, we have the total number of rating units, we have the total land value, we have the total capital value for the district, and that's the equation that we use to come up with the rate in the dollar that goes into the rate setting paper and the annual plan. So that goes through a full legal and audit review before it's even presented. So just to be very clear, there's very stringent controls around that process as well. So Mark already alluded to this, that the councils have limits on or controls around the factors, the things that we can actually use to set rates, and they are set out in the Local Government Rating Act. So our rating system, currently we have 15 rating mechanisms, if you like. So they're all documented in our annual and long-term plans. And what's included in there is obviously the rates requirement and the basis for how we rate different types of properties. So as Mark said, there are a mix of land, capital and fixed targeted rates, as well as the water based on volume, which is also a targeted rate. So for the current year, around 42% of our rates revenue comes from fixed charges. So this is really just a sort of pictorial view of the break of sort of the percentage between land, capital and our fixed and volumetric. So as you can see, 42% based on fixed charge, 5% variable, 15% based on the capital value, and 37% based on land value. So obviously our biggest rating category, the district-wide general rate, is based on land value and generally makes up the biggest portion of any rates bill.
So this is me. So as Vicky said, when we talk about our rating policy, its full name is the Funding Impact Statement Rating Policy, and these are published in both our annual plans and long-term plans. And what does it include? Well, it sets out, we call them rating mechanisms, but effectively they are rates. So this council has 15 different types of rates. So it sets out all those rates, provides a description of what those rates are for. It sets out very clearly whether it's a fixed charge, is it a rate in the dollar land value, is it a rate in the dollar capital value, or when we get down to the water, it sets out the variable charge per 1,000 litres of water. Not only, it also breaks down the amount of revenue that's derived, or the total amount of revenue that's derived by each rate, both GST inclusive and exclusive. And importantly, it also sets out, so with our property rates, we charge our property rates by instalments. So we have 4 instalments a year. So it sets out what is the payment due date throughout the year. It sets out the date by which we can apply a penalty for the late payment of the rates. And under the Local Government Rating Act, it also sets out at what point can we apply a penalty to rates that have been set and invoiced in previous financial years that are outstanding. We can apply a penalty to that. Now, the Local Government Rating Act provides for local authorities can apply for rates that are outstanding at the start of a financial year. The legislation provides that you can apply a 10% penalty 2 times throughout the year. It is this council's policy to only apply 1 penalty for rates that are outstanding at the start of the year. But we do through our rating policy apply a late payment penalty to each of the 4 instalments throughout the year. Now, we work very hard with our ratepayers, and we do recognise that ratepayers struggle to pay. So for ratepayers that contact us and work with us, we put them on a payment plan. As soon as they're on a payment plan, we don't apply a late payment penalty. We do have flags in our system. We are proactive. If we see that there's an account that seems to be in arrears, we also make contact. Some questions. I see Dale's indicating a question. Did anyone indicate a question before? Over to you, Dale.
Can you tell me why then? Can it work? Why haven't you in advance? I've paid my rates for the last 15, 20 years in advance. And you've never given me an incentive for a discount off. Now, you're using my money. I mean, you basically, it should work both ways. Come on.
I guess my comment to that was, I mean, you choose to pay in advance, so by default don't get penalised.
No.
Yeah, I mean, there are options on how you can pay. You know, the majority of our customers do pay on the instalment date, so they keep their funds in their own account till the last minute. They avoid the penalty, and you know, from our perspective, we're receiving the funds when we expect to.
You'll get more incentives from the community.
It's interesting because I've actually seen a bit of correspondence around different councils that do offer discounts and that are moving away from doing that, because there's obviously a cost to offering the discount as well. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, but certainly not one that every council offers.
So just to add a further response to the question. So embedded in our rating policy is we don't encourage lump sum payments because we don't offer discounts. And as Vicky said, so if you got a prompt, if we were to say prompt or offer a prompt payment discount, then effectively that is a cost. That is a cost that is either going to be funded by rates or it's going to be funded by borrowing. So we work very hard to keep the rates as low as possible. It is not within the policy. Council works very hard to keep them as low as possible. If you were to start offering early payment discounts, that is effectively a cost that needs to be funded, as I said, either through rates or through borrowings.
What do you use? You obtain information from the Inland Revenue Department of the. Do you, or sort of phrase it? Do you obtain information from Inland Revenue Department in helping you set the rates, or is that incorrect?
So no, we don't use any information from other agencies to set the rates.
A follow-up question: did Vicky say that 42% of our rates are fixed charges? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So how much would be land and how much would be capital?
So that was on the previous slide. So 37% are based on land value based rates and 15% capital value.
And just going back to one of your earlier questions, Councillor Randall, if you took other councils and you analysed their total rates revenue, the pie chart will look slightly different because it can be quite different with different communities. Yes, good evening.
Hi, my name's Ron Tustin. You have thank you very much for what you've shared with us. But you have a structure in place for setting the rates, which you've done internally, by the sound of it. And it sounds like if you're wanting to make any changes, it's going to be in 3 years' time, perhaps. So I'm just wondering, because of the nature of what we're in at the moment, how has the pandemic planning impacted on the review so far?
Two slightly separate issues. I think that the essence of what the team are talking to you today is about how we will split up the way we collect what we need to collect. So arguably that doesn't change at all. Your question probably goes to how much do we need? And then as a secondary issue, there might be, are there some consequential impacts on the choices of rates that we use to collect it that we might want to revisit? Off the top of my head, I don't think there are any at the moment. But in terms of what has been the impact on us as an organisation from the pandemic, we initially assessed that it could be as high as $1.4 million at the beginning. It has come in at less than that for the financial year that we've just completed. Those reports are not yet final, but it's probably more like half of that is what it's come in to cost us. Looking ahead, it's also there's a large element of uncertainty because, of course, we can keep the pools and libraries open at level 2, but if we go into level 3 and 4, we can't. Now, we can't anticipate if and when we go in and how long for, and therefore how much revenue we would lose and how much cost we would either incur or not incur through being closed or other things that we can or can't do. Pretty convoluted answer, but we have to look ahead and try and anticipate what those would be. And adjust our costs and therefore our revenue requirements accordingly. And we're doing that to the best of our ability. In terms of how that impacts on the rates mechanisms that we will use, we haven't consciously identified any needed changes.
Can I just quickly respond? I think we're probably talking across each other here about that, because I was thinking more to do with the community that the council serves, the impact that's had on individual lives impacts on their payment ability for a start. And secondly, I see examples around the country of local authorities who are making changes now, who are shedding staff, who are reducing services. That was what my question was really referring to, I think.
So again, the perfectly valid question. The point of the rates presentation is not so much to address those questions, but there are two sides to that, and it is generally accepted actually that an austerity approach would be exactly the wrong thing to do, that the work hasn't gone away and still needs to be done. For those people who are having affordability issues, that is where the government is here to step in and provide support to them. Local government has very limited resources to help in that space. But what we do offer, and Mark can talk you through it, we offered a package of support including rates deferrals and including things like rent holidays for those few tenants that we do have in our own property. So we did do those things that we could, and we can talk you through those. But I would absolutely say that, yes, we acknowledge those people that are suffering, and it is for central government to step up to the plate in that space, and we help where we can in terms of our on-the-ground response through welfare. And we put in, during the lockdown, 10,000 hours of staff time into exactly that. So that wasn't business as usual, that was us stepping up and helping. So all the economic evidence from 2008-9, and if you want to look at the UK, says that austerity, shedding staff and cutting costs unnecessarily, actually just exacerbates the problem.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. When we were looking at the COVID response here around this table, something had been raised in other parts of the country, and that was the central government applying the blunt tool of removing or subsidising the GST portion of rates bills through the periods that we were in lockdown. So can I ask, what was the government response when that was taken to them as a suggestion? Do you know?
It's currently a remit that Local Government New Zealand is looking at, so it hasn't been taken to government. So the Local Government New Zealand AGM is actually on Friday, and that's where all councils in the country get to vote on those remits. So you know how these political processes work, and then advocacy organisations like LGNZ will take those remits forward to government and say this is what we think. And there have been many iterations of them saying GST on rates is a tax on a tax, shouldn't be there. No disagreement from anybody in local government about that. Central government has always said, yeah, that's wonderful, but actually we can't afford to give back those billions, so we're not. The latest version is, well, okay, keep collecting the tax, but give it back to local government as long as they only spend it on infrastructure and other things that are economic stimulus based. I would suggest to you that it won't get anywhere. But that's just my opinion.
So just following on from what the Chief Executive has said, I'd be happy to, at the end of the workshop, for those of you that would like to have a discussion on further details of the community support package, as well as the unprecedented decisions that the Council made to actually reduce our average rates increase to 2.6%, I'd be happy to have that conversation at the end of the workshop. So behind me is just really an extract of the of our rating policy. This just really follows on what I've told you already. As I said, it's just an extract. That particular one is showing the council's commercial rate, so it provides a description of what that rate is actually for. At the top, it does show you the amount of rates revenue that's being derived by that particular rate. And this is right at the back end of the policy, so it does set out by way of a summary. So we've effectively on this page, we've got two of our rates. We've got our commercial rate and our water conservation loan device rate, or water conservation device rate. And then we set out and we show what's the rates revenue with and without GST. And we can see that we get to $71 million. So the funding impact statement rates policy is quite a long document. As you know, there's 15 different rates. It sets out everything on each page. But this just gives you a summary at the end, so you can see exactly what revenue has been derived from our rates and what's the total rates revenue requirement for the year. So just wanted to show you an extract so that you can be familiar with the policy.
Okay, so this particular page is also part of the funding impact statement, or the FIS as we call it. So this sets out the due dates and penalty dates for both the property and water rates. So both of those tables are also published on the back of every invoice and assessment notice that we send out as well to customers. So as Mark mentioned before, so these dates are actually set in the rate setting paper that's adopted by Council in June each year after the annual plan or long-term plan is adopted. Okay. So the next slide is really just sort of going into a little bit more detail about when we send the invoices and assessments out. So August every year is when we set our rates or strike our rates. So that process actually adds all the rates onto every rating account in our database, all 25,200 odd of them, and creates that first invoice, which is then sent out to every property owner. So they're sent out by either post or email, depending on what customers have elected to get. At the moment we're about 15,000 posted, around close to 9,000 emailed. So pretty good uptake when compared to a lot of other councils. So that first invoice that goes out in August has three parts to it. So the first page is the invoice or the summary, the statement. The next two pages are both our councils and Greater Wellington's, basically a breakdown of all the rating components that make up their rates bill. They're issued approximately about a month before each due date, and also for water rates they're issued quarterly, but obviously in a different cycle to the property rates. Water rates are based on when we actually physically read meters in each part of the district, and because of the amount of water meters we have, we've effectively had to divide the district into three. So we read a different part of the district each month. The first 3 weeks of each month are for the actual physical reading of the meter, and that data is sent to us from our contracted meter readers, and the last week of each month is effectively takes us the last week to collate all that and then do our checks and actually generate the invoices. So as Mark also indicated, the penalty dates are set in June each year, and for any current invoice that isn't paid by the due date, a 10% penalty is added on those particular due dates to both property and water rates. We also have the arrears penalty date, which is also set through the rate setting on the rate setting paper, and that's applied in July each year, and that's in terms of the Local Government Rating Act.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Does the 10% penalty applied annually 5 days after the New Year's rates are adopted, is that actually in the Council's rates resolution or the Local Government Rating Act, or is it in both?
So the Local Government Rating Act allows councils to set... sorry, is it not on? The Local Government Rating Act allows councils to apply a second, what we call an arrears penalty, 5 working days after the rate setting paper in June. It is, yep. The Act allows for 2 arrears penalties to be added. As Mark mentioned, this particular council only applies it once. So the maximum is 10%. So the Local Government Rating Act allows for penalties up to a maximum of 10% to be applied.
Excuse me, just a question as well. I don't think I've got my own answer for this, but the 10% penalty seems quite high, but would I assume that that's more of an incentive to move people onto the payment plan to avoid to basically spread those payments out or to avoid the penalty side of things? Or is that how that's sort of put together as such?
I guess my answer to that is, in terms of if you're looking at from the costs involved if people don't pay by the due date versus the 10% penalty, I'm not sure if you can correlate that entirely, but certainly it is an incentive for people to pay by the due date or contact us if they're having some trouble. We do have a number of people on payment plans, and we certainly are very proactive in encouraging that and working with people throughout the year. From our perspective, we'd rather be helping people through that process than following the collection process that the Local Government Rating Act allows us to do. We'd prefer to avoid that process as well.
So I asked this question, but ending the rates people haven't paid, and with the water rates, which is basically, they tell me that it's so high.
So one of the next slides does have some information about the rates that are outstanding. The numbers haven't been finalised, but will be available in the June quarterly report that I believe is going to be available later this week. Tomorrow. So that is reported on every quarter, the total rates and water rates that are outstanding. So I'm sorry, I didn't bring the March numbers with me.
People will pay it.
Thank you. Just checking in. Are there any questions before I move on? Okay. Just checking that I haven't missed anyone. Thanks, Vicky. So behind me is a chart. It's just really showing the basically it's lots of colours in the charts. It's just showing graphically by way of colour most of our 15 different types of rates. But in essence, what it's actually showing you is the total rates revenue for the 1920 financial year compared to the total rates revenue for the 2021 financial year. So when we kick-started this presentation, we said that the rates revenue, or the average rates increase, was 2.6%. So the key parts of this slide is that for 1920, the total rates revenue was $68.9 million, and working with councillors to set the annual plan to determine the levels of service and the costs of that, we required just under $71 million of rates revenue. That includes water. That's all of our rates. And if you calculated the percentage increase there, you would correctly come to 3%. Our average rates increase of 2.6% is a net of 0.4% growth. So within our rates, adjustments for differential circumstances. So with our 15 different types of rates, some of those rates have what we call effectively they're multipliers, and in the rating world we call those differentials. And those differentials reflect different levels of service that are either demanded or received by different types of ratepayers. So the easiest way to explain this, and if you go through our rating policy, you can actually go through lots of our rates and you can see the differentials or the different multipliers. But I'd like to just hone in on our district-wide general rate to explain what I mean by a multiplier or a differential. So the district-wide general rate is effectively a rate in the dollar land value that's applied to every single rating unit in the district. Now, the differentials are U1, R1, R2 and R3. So U1 stands for an urban rating unit, and R1, R2 and R3, the R denotes a rural rating unit. So as I said, so the district-wide general rate, what does that fund? So district-wide general rate is quite a long list, so I can't remember everything, but effectively what it does is it pays for the costs of civil defence, it pays for the costs of our regulatory services that aren't funded by fees and charges, public toilets, cemeteries. It covers what else have I got?
Yeah, it is quite. Sorry, it is quite a long list. So there's emergency management, public toilets, cemeteries, social wellbeing, economic development, environmental sustainability, district-wide coastal protection, district-wide strategic flood protection. Yeah, there's a very long list in there of what that covers.
So the starting point is to work out, well, what is the total rates revenue requirement that we are going to charge by way of the district-wide general rate, and we calculate a rate in the dollar land value. And so the urban rating unit will pay a rate in the dollar land value, and that's what we tend to call 100%. So the urban rate, so the rate in the dollar land value for urban rating units is X amount. So that's deemed to be the 100%. So the maximum cost in the dollar land value is applied against our residential rating units in our urban rating areas. Then we look at our rural properties, and we recognise that with our rural properties, some are large, some are extremely large, so that there's a lower population density amongst our rural ratepayers as there are compared to our urban ratepayers, and so their demands on our services are less. So what we say is, in terms of our differentials, we say that for rural properties that where the land area is under 50 hectares, they pay 38% of the urban rate. So you effectively take the urban rate in the dollar land value. If you're R1, you pay 38% of that. R2 is given for rural properties that are larger than 50 hectares. So they pay 22% of the urban rate. So you take the urban rate in the dollar land value, you multiply that by 22%, and that's what our rural property ratepayers with properties larger than 50 hectares pay. And then we've got an R3 differential. So I'm not trying to confuse you, I'm just trying to take you through. We've got different multipliers. So R3 is for rating units that are within our rural village differential areas within the district. And that is currently 70% of our urban rate. So you take the urban rate in the dollar land value, multiply that by 70%, and so that's what properties that are in the rural village rating area will pay. So again, it really just comes to, we've got 15 different types of rates. They can be a fixed charge, they can be a rate in the dollar land value, they can be a rate in the dollar capital value, and then to complicate that even further, we have differentials. So that's why when we say an average of 2.6% rates increase, it's you need to actually take an actual property. You need to actually go through the rates calculator for to actually establish what a particular property's rates increase will be, which is why we have those examples on the median property value. And we do encourage, during our consultation process, we do encourage our ratepayers to go onto our website and use our online rates calculator. So just some fact sheet. I think Vicky's given most of this away. So our population as per the 2018 census is 53,673. We know today we're roughly 57,000. My apologies, 57,000. I think I won't just ramble these figures off. I'll give you the key points. So here we go. So the rate arrears as at the 1st of July 2020 was $2.3 million. 381,000 of that was Greater Wellington Regional Council rates. So it's 2.7% of the 1920 revenue. So you can see that our collectability of our rates revenue is very high. If we look back, if we went backwards a year, so the total rates outstanding is at the 1st of July 2019 was $1.87 million. And for the 18-19 year, we collected $620,000 by way of late payment penalties. Again, I'd just like to emphasise what Vicky said, is that we are very proactive, monitoring our ratepayers' rate accounts. Those that are falling behind, we are proactive, we do contact them. We do actually, as far as possible, we do put people onto payment plans. Once they're on a payment plan, we don't apply the late payment penalties.
Okay, so this takes us on to the next part, which is our rates remission policies. So we do have quite a comprehensive remission policy made up of 9 different parts. Rates remissions are funded by rates, and these are in addition to what central government offers by way of the rates rebate. So probably the next slide sort of gives you the actual list of all the policies. I won't go into detail on each of them. They're all available in detail on our website, and also long-term plan has the full rates remission policy available.
Vicky, could we just, would you mind just talking at a very high level about Part 6? We are flexible and we are reasonable.
Sure. Okay, so Part 6 is in regards to late payment penalties. So we do have quite a comprehensive policy on that, where people, through a range of different scenarios, have been unable to pay their rates by the due date. They've incurred a penalty. They can contact us and apply for the penalty to be reviewed. Generally, extraordinary circumstances, could be something as a bereavement in the family. Look, we're more than willing to talk through that process, and we do every month process quite a range of penalty remissions for customers. So that's something we sort of actively offer when customers contact to say that they have incurred a penalty and there are reasons for why they couldn't pay on time.
Is that increasing?
I'm sorry, is that
increasing?
Look, the honest truth is certainly in the last couple of months I have noticed an increase in applications. Yes, I would agree to that.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott.
So can you just refresh my memory? Is there a fixed pool for this annually for the rates remission? And if so, can that be funded by the income that is collected through the rates penalties? Or can it be added to? Which would be approximately 600,000 K this year, last financial year there.
So there is a budget each year for rates remissions in terms of the whole policy. So in 1920 it was 404,000. 2021 it's 408, I believe. Yep. So that is budgeted for.
Question then. So considering it's got to last 12 months then, what would happen if there was a bit of a rush on during a quarter of more than 25%, say, of that budget, and that kept happening? How do those flags get raised that there may not be the funding there for to meet the remission request demand?
So I guess the majority of the remission policy is set aside for the general rates assistance. Okay, so approximately 204,000 in 1920. So, and I was sort of going to talk to this a little bit later, but no, I can cover it off. So I guess the process for the general rates assistance, which is on top of the government rates rebate. So the way we manage this process is customers can apply for the government rates rebate from the 1st of July every year. Okay, so we actively send out rates rebate forms to around 2,000 customers in August each year when we send out the first rates invoice. So what we use is the mailing list people that received the rebate in the previous year. We post them out a form, and we're actively processing rebates right now. Generally, we probably process about half of our annual rebate number in the first 6 weeks of any rating year. So once we get to about December, what we do is we take stock of who's applied for the government rates rebate that would qualify for our own general assistance policy, and we actually actively send out remission forms to all those customers, and then from January we accept applications. So we start processing applications from February, the beginning of February. So we are keeping a very active eye on the numbers that are applying and the value, and monitoring that very closely against the budget. So I guess what I've found in the last couple of years is that we do have to make customers aware that the budget is limited, and that while they can apply up until the 30th of June each year, with the budget limited, those that apply first are unfortunately first in, first served. So that's why we take the proactive approach we do, is to make sure those that certainly would qualify based on the information they've already applied with their rates rebate are applying. We also do a lot of advertising as well to supplement that.
Couple of points that I think we haven't quite mentioned, but I'm sure you're all aware. With the COVID situation, we actually waived rates penalties for a quarter, just acknowledging that people would have difficulties, even simply timing. And we also offered a rates delay, if you like. So things like that were on application. We could arrange a payment plan where you could pay it off later. Not many people took it up, and actually a lot of people would advise you not to create a bow wave of payments later. If you can keep paying a bit regularly, that's better. But we really wanted to encourage people to say, we will come to the party here and help you if you've got you really got a short-term constraint. As I say, I think there's only a couple of hundred that took it up, was it?
Look, I checked on it yesterday. There's 100, just over 100.
So out of 25,000 ratepayers, only 100 people felt they needed to do that. You could argue not everyone was aware of it, probably, but that's an interesting signal to me that the majority of the people felt that they were okay to still manage these costs.
So no, we only apply a penalty to the current instalment. So if they owe $2,000, but only 500 of that is for the current instalment, they only incur a penalty on the 500, not the total balance, apart from that one time in July. Right. Okay. So,
just have one. We have a question.
Thank you.
Where do people find the information of who to apply to for that? And I presume it's you, is it? Are you the person who handles that?
So I certainly do the first review. It does require sign off by the group manager for all penalty remissions.
So normally, if the people are in I know a couple of people who had late penalties, and what you were saying to me is good news, because that's not the experience they've had. And so I was just wondering, how can I pass on information, or where do they find out the process? That's a simple question.
So I guess certainly ask them to contact me directly. I'm perfectly fine with that, but certainly all our customer engagement team are aware of the policy, our rates team, and anybody that rings to query the balance on their latest invoice and any question regarding a penalty, my team are very proactive at advising them of what the process is.
If I could just add to that, I've just looked up the council website. It's quite a comprehensive page. If you just punch in rates remission, all this information's on the website there as well, with links. fairly comprehensive there.
Thank you, Councillor Hellider. You stole my thunder there. Yes, it is. The information, if you wanted to just research the information, it's available on the website, but it's also available in our long-term plan documents as well.
So this slide was around the rates assistance policy, which is I've talked a little bit about. So the rates assistance policy is effectively made up of three different parts. So there is the general rates assistance. So that's available, offering a maximum of $300 per ratepayer. It's available to tenants as well as property owners. Tenants would have to apply in conjunction with their landlord. And effectively the criteria for property owners is that they must have they must have applied for the rates rebate first in order to be able to apply for council's remission policy, and KCDC portion of rates, Kapiti Coast District Council portion of rates, net of the government rates rebate, needs to exceed 5% of net household income. So as I mentioned before, we send out applications in December each year to those that have already received the rates rebate, and we start receiving applications from January and processing from February because of the limits on the budget. Effectively, we process until available funds have been allocated, or the 30th of June, whichever occurs first. So if we are getting close to meeting that budget, we do advertise that as well. Through our customer engagement team, we're very proactive at making them aware of that. Because obviously we want everybody that can receive it to receive it.
Mr. Evans, could you just turn your microphone on, please?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Okay. Dying and accumulate said, well, I can't pay my rates. So do you have some system where the rates are accumulated by each year and it's taken off the estate?
So we do have a rates postponement policy as well, which I think is what you're alluding to. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm not totally familiar with this, but effectively there is a process that they would have to go through. If there is a mortgage on the property, they'd have to get permission from their mortgagee. What the policy uses is equity in the property. They'd have to have a minimum of 80% equity off the top of my head in order to... Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the first part. Sorry, can you... So you're saying this is the properties in the estate?
I've heard that in the past that you had a system where if somebody doesn't pay their rates and it comes off eventually comes off their estate when they die after 12, I don't know how many years it is. I don't know. Is that correct?
So, I mean...
If somebody's really sick and they can't pay their rates.
Yeah, so Mr. Evans, it would be quite an unusual circumstance if it took years to settle up an estate, I think, in terms of a rates bill. But fundamentally, yes, if it for as long as it would take before settlement of the estate, if the rates were unable to be paid, yes, it would be settled up because they continue to be payable, and so yes, the people settling up that estate would have to pay those bills. They are a first ranking payable item ahead of most other things that people are obliged to pay.
That's right. So, I mean, when the property is eventually sold, which is normally my experience in the case of an estate, then all rates would be settled at that point.
Right. So you'd have a lien over the property?
not necessarily a lien. The Local Government Rating Act effectively gives us first call on when a property sells. Any rates that are outstanding at that point are recoverable. Right, so moving on to part 2 of the general rates assistance policy is what we call the temporary financial assistance. So once again, this is offering a maximum of up to $300 per ratepayer, and this policy allows for ratepayers to apply if they've incurred one-off costs for essential housing maintenance. They've had to replace their roof, they've had to repair a water leak, those types of things. It also allows for ongoing costs arising from health issues. And the third tranche is related to water rates, and so this is called the Water Rates Remission for Vulnerable Households relating to high water use. So the maximum available for this policy per applicant is $120, and once again it's open to tenants as well who apply in conjunction with their landlord. So this particular part of the policy is only available in the last quarter of every rating year, so applicants can apply from the 1st of May to the 30th of June. And what the criteria is that their total water costs for the first 3 quarters of each year must exceed $311, and they must have 2 or more dependents that they're receiving working for families tax credit for. So it's effectively targeted towards those larger families that, by the nature of having more people in the household, may be incurring additional water costs. So the next table, this was published in our March quarterly report, so we do report on this each quarter. It's just giving a summary of where we're tracking for each of the remission policies compared to the annual budget.
Just in addition to that, in terms of the quarterly report, we also indicate the number of successful applications regards the central government rebate as well. So this is on top of the central government rebate. So that information is in our quarterly finance updates to the Strategy and Operations Committee.
Just according to that there, is that tracking on the financial year, which has got another quarter to go? Would that be expected that will be used up?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. As we'll see tomorrow, it basically is fully used up. Yes.
Okay, so the next section literally is, I just took this out of our quarterly finance report, so it is a written section that I just report on the number and value of government rates rebates that have been processed up to the 31st of March. So in 1920, the maximum rebate available was $640. That's since been increased for the current year to $655 per applicant, which is our next slide. So as I said, we posted out just under 2,100 rates rebate forms at the beginning of August. As of this morning, we've processed nearly 360 applications in the last week alone for this year. So the next slide is around the actual rates collection process. So as Mark indicated, and I've mentioned previously, we do actively try to work with customers throughout the year to, before things get to the point of actually following the collection process that is set out in the Local Government Rating Act. So we try to set up workable payment arrangements with customers, to obviously try and suit their circumstances. When we're setting up a payment arrangement, what we're really looking for is to try and get them, back up to date again by the end of the current rating year. And that's sort of, our first starting point. So where we're either not able to come to an arrangement, or customers aren't contacting us, or haven't been able to maintain an arrangement, the Local Government Rating Act does have a process that all councils follow for the collection of outstanding rates. So in the last 2 years, we've also used the services of Debt Management Central. So they're a shared service, a service shared by quite a number of councils across the country. They follow the same process that we would have to follow through the Local Government Rating Act. So the process effectively is that when rates are outstanding from a previous rating year, the Act says that we can, and there is a mortgage over the property. A condition of any mortgage is that rates have to be kept up to date, and where they are not, we can notify the mortgagee of the situation with rates being outstanding. So what that effectively does is give the customer 3 months to try and either come to an arrangement or try and find an alternative way of getting their rates up to date, either in discussion with their bank. And if that process fails, then from the 1st of November each year, we can actually make a demand on their mortgagee. So we can actually request that their bank pay the rate arrears. So to be clear, this is only rates outstanding from previous rating years. This is not rates that we're invoicing throughout the current year. And then the bank is required, or mortgagee is required to pay once we've issued that demand. So they will then recover that from their customer as per the terms of their mortgage.
I'm just curious, do we exercise that right often at all?
As I say, we try to avoid it. It is a last resort, which is why we're very proactive at working with customers so that we don't get to that point. But yes, the reality is there are customers that we do have to follow that process. So I don't have numbers. I'm sorry, I didn't bring those.
Mr. Burns.
What's the process if the land is freehold and the rates are outstanding and the person moves away or passes on?
So once again, the process is set out in the Local Government Rating Act. It is a longer process, but it is effectively obtaining judgment through the courts to recover the rates. This council hasn't followed that process that I'm aware of, certainly in the time that I've been here as yet. But that process is allowable through the Local Government Rating Act.
Can you tell me, the rate rebate, the council, do you work in the Inland Revenue Department?
No, we do not have access to their records. The rates rebate requires customers to provide proof of their income, so they would have to source that proof themselves, either from...
They don't refer that back to what the person may be earning?
No.
No, okay.
So, thank you. We're actually on our last slide with 3 minutes to go, but I'm happy to take questions and stay afterwards. So, the district-wide revaluation. So, we have actually really touched on this. So, every 3 years, the Valuer General does require a district-wide revaluation. Our last one was done in 2017, so we are doing one this year. And as the slide says, so it's probably not the best way to describe it, but the effective date is the effective date is the 15th of August. So what that means is that the Valuer General puts a stake in the ground and says what are the property values as at the 15th of August. So they're looking at the capital value, which is the land value plus the improvements as at the 15th of August, the Valuer General uses quotable value to do desktop reviews and assess the values of the properties throughout the district. What then happens is they do that piece of work and they apply several different methodologies. Certain properties, they'll actually come and do site inspections. They'll do a desktop review where they'll look at the sales of similar properties in the same street, in the same area. They'll look at building consent values. They'll look at some information that we hold, and they'll come up with what the new capital value is for each property in the district. Their assessment and their new valuations are then notified to property owners by the end of October. And then property owners have got the option to object to their new valuations. Normally that's a 4-week period, but we've actually specified that for our district, we want to have a longer period. So the Valuer General has agreed to a 6-week period. So this is a process whereby the property owners are objecting to their values directly with quotable value. There's different ways of doing that. You can do it online, you can phone them. And in the past, they've actually come up and held sessions throughout the district where members of the public can sit down and have a chat with them. So it is a 6-week period, or the objection period is 6 weeks, and that closes on the 4th of December 2020. Effectively, that then will be the value of the properties. And then we rate accordingly on those property values only from the 1st of July 2021. So where I said the effective date of the 15th of August, it is a bit misleading because we only rate on the new value of the properties on the 1st of July the following year. So what we do is we do quite an extensive communication campaign, as we are well aware that there is a misconception that it is the council that is driving this process. We want to increase the value of the property so we can take more in rates. And so we do a lot of explanation about the process and what it actually means. If your property value goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're paying more in rates. It really depends on a number of factors. What is the rates revenue requirement that's determined at the council? And where is your new property value in relation to the average increase of the property values? If the council requires more rates revenue from the current year and your property value has increased beyond the average increase, then you will pay more in rates. If your property value has gone down below the average, you may be paying the same or a little bit lower. So there's lots of variables, but we do have several briefings with the councillors and elected members, and we do, as I said, quite an extensive communication campaign. It's run jointly by Quotable Value and ourselves, but we just make sure that everyone really understands what impact the property revaluations will have on their properties. And as I said, those new values come into play for rating purposes on the 1st of July 2021. So it is always a challenge for the council because that's the start, that's year one of our long-term plan. So we're doing a rating system review, we're doing a district-wide revaluation, we're doing a new long-term plan. So again, lots of this information generally sits within our consultation document as well. Guy.
The quotable value in New Zealand, do they tender for that process, or is it a free service?
Just generally speaking, no, It's contracted, so we sign up a 3-yearly contract with quotable value, with rights of renewal. There's not a lot of players in the market. Quotable value certainly do the Wellington region. They do Auckland. They've got a lot of local knowledge. So we're contracted to use quotable value at the moment. Did you want to add?
So probably the only thing I'd add it is a regional contract that all the local authorities have signed up to. Yep.
Do you want to just
based on things that are happening in the area, you know. Stormwater is one of the biggest issues in this area. How much is it based on that, the rates? I mean, what percentage is it?
Mr. Evans, is your question how much of the total rates revenue take is for stormwater?
Yep.
It's about 4, yeah. We're just looking it up. We have the rating policy in front of us, so please bear with us.
I'd like to know that because it doesn't cease, it's getting worse.
So stormwater rates requirement this year was 2.7 million. I don't know the percentage.
We need to be careful not to mix up the capital expenditure that we need to do on stormwater across the district, which is a 45-year program of work for a value of about 240 million. That's capital expenditure, and that translates to rates once we've spent it, and we have to incur depreciation and other operating costs. So there's not a direct translation of that until those costs are spent. Capital expenditure, yeah. From an operating expenditure perspective, it's actually one of the smaller ones. The total for the 3 waters is about 20 million a year. Stormwater is 3 or 4 of that. The other 2 waters are by far so water and wastewater are by far the bigger operating costs that we incur.
Okay.
Fred.
Whoops. Right, okay, I seem to be on. If I go back to perhaps one of the earlier sessions we had, the first one, where we discussed what the expenses of the accounts were on, we touched on CapEx, we touched on operating expenditure. We went into detail on capital expenditure, but we didn't touch on operating expenditure. Now, a lot of what's been mentioned today would have shown up if we'd gone into the operating expenditure. So I think this is often, if you're dealing with big budgets, and I've had to deal with big budgets, it's the operating side of things, which is where it's most difficult to sort out what you can afford to spend and what you should be spending. And I think it's probably be quite valuable if one actually acted and started looking at that, instead of just saying, that's operating expenditure, put it on the side, that's a given. We just concentrate on capital expenditure, which is really what we did in that first session. So I think that is a concern. The second concern I have is that I've heard today the word customer used a lot. Not ratepayers, customers. Is the council officers or the council something separate and we don't have an interest from the point of view of us ratepayers? Are we just the same as any person from general public? I feel there's an attitudinal problem which is a bit concerning there. And the third one, I guess, is which Mr. Maxwell dismissed quite nicely, and that was the long-term plan. From what I understand from what he said, we're going to stay with the current long-term plan, something which was set up, 3 years ago, when we were in a boom economy. We are going to have major changes. We're already in major economic changes now. Are we going to review that long-term plan in the next year, or are we going to continue with it? Because if you look at some of the factors within it, then council staff or council officers, they have to be more precise, can justify expenditure because it's within the long-term plan. And that comment, I believe, has been made at council meetings, perhaps. Somebody will have to put me right on that one. Quite happy to be told I'm wrong. But it can be used to justify an expenditure which you might not, because of change of circumstance, want to follow up on. Thank you.
I totally agree with that, because basically we put stuff out in the long-term planning when it comes to do. And what happens then?
So thank you, Fred. Thank you for your questions. I'll start with the easy one. In terms of the long-term plan, yes, this council will be reviewing and will be reviewing the long-term plan. There will be a new long-term plan as at the 1st of July 2021. As per the current long-term plan, it will have a 20-year view. Long-term plans are reviewed every 3 years, and absolutely we will be working with our councillors and our elected members to develop a long-term plan, which will then go out for public consultation.
As well as that, there's the annual plan process which happens each year, which double checks on expenditure for that coming year, and that's an opportunity to make changes as well. There's also the opportunity to make changes with special consultative processes under the significance policy. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And finally, thanks for crediting me with some stuff that I'm absolutely certain I never said, but that's okay, that's what you heard. We have no choice but to redo long-term plans every 3 years as a minimum. We can actually do them every year if we have significant changes. So if the changes to what we were doing were material, we would be obliged to. It would only be the right thing to do. So if we couldn't afford what, due to circumstances, if something had come along that says we can no longer afford it, or indeed we actually need to do a whole lot more, we would be obliged to do an amended LTP. The reasons why we would be reluctant to do that include the fact that it will probably cost in the order of $500,000 each time. And that's money that could be spent on actually doing the work instead of creating the document that says, is it okay to do the work? So, you know, you've got to balance all of those decisions off as you do them. The costs of auditing those are huge. The costs of preparation and consultation are huge. And so the government, in its wisdom, many years ago said you will do the minimum of every 3 years and an annual plan process in between where you will have a look at it and see, you know, what are the changes to that over time. So that's the long-term plan question. Do you want to go to the other ones, Mark?
Yes, thank you, Wayne. So secondly, you just indicated some concerns about our terminology where we refer to customers versus ratepayers. So tonight's presentation is about the rating system. So legally, in terms of legally, we have to invoice the property owners' rates invoices, but generally we think of our customers and our stakeholders. So ratepayers are legally, the owners of the properties are legally liable to pay the rates. So when we're talking about the rating system, we're talking about our ratepayers, because our ratepayers are liable to pay the rates. In terms of our customers, we have a broad range, and we think about our customers all the time. So people that use our facilities, our swimming pools, our libraries, they may not necessarily be ratepayers, they may be visitors to the district. So when we start to talk to you about community facilities, we are thinking about our customers. We have coming through into our front counter, we have developers. We have people that are applying for resource consents. We have people that are applying for developer contributions that are developers, that aren't ratepayers. So tonight the emphasis has been on the word ratepayers because we've been explaining to you how the rating system works. But we're constantly thinking about our customers that includes ratepayers, but also includes visitors to our district. So I hope that clarifies for you that our terminology is we think of all our stakeholders and all our customers all the time. Your first point that you raised was you felt that we, if I can summarise what you said, that we potentially glossed over the operating expenditure, that we focused more heavily on capital expenditure. So I guess we, on Monday's presentation, that was really about running through Council's financial performance and position. So Council's financial performance is largely its operating expenditure, and what we took you through in that workshop was the categories: our personnel, our maintenance, our operations expenditure, our depreciation, and our interest costs. Yesterday we went in great length to talk to you about our interest costs, our net interest costs, which is our interest revenue and our interest expenditure. But on Monday we also introduced the concept of the rates funding surplus or deficit, where we went through the add-backs and the deductions. So we have opened the book on our operating expenditure. When we develop or work through the annual plan or the long-term plan determination process, we do go through all our operating expenditure with our councillors and elected members. Last night we shone the torch on our depreciation funding, or the fact that we aren't fully funding our depreciation, and said that that is a rates funded expenditure. So I'm very happy to take it offline with you and go through the operating expenditure again. But we over the course of the last 2 nights, we have actually gone into great detail in our operating expenditure. So I'm happy to take that offline with you.
Can I comment on that from an elected member perspective? I don't think you described the operating expenditure as being a given. I don't think it is. Through each annual plan and long-term plan, as Mark said, we do address operating expenditure as well as capital expenditure. What we kind of have more influence over is the capital expenditure through those processes. But was it the last long-term plan or the one before we actually specifically went out and consulted on levels of service, which was operational expenditure, including frequency of mowing lawns and things like that, to test the appetite in the community for reducing levels of service and hence operational expenditure? So it's certainly something that we do think about.
And just lastly, I really just wanted to reiterate what the Chief Executive said on Monday night. We provided the example. So if we use the 1920 financial year, that $690,000 of operating expenditure equates to 1% of rates. So when we start to look at the rates increase, there's a heavy focus in our operating expenditure. We're also asked to demonstrate what impact does our CapEx have on our rates. And what we heard from the Chief Executive, which is what I've emphasised today, that the capital works program this year will be funded by borrowing, so the impact on rates is through our interest charges. Once we've completed that asset has been commissioned and it's been put into use, then we start to depreciate that. So we spread the cost of that asset over its useful economic life. That adds to the depreciation, which you've seen tonight. The current 2.6% average rates increase, 2% relates to additional depreciation. So it very much all comes back to what is the operating expenditure and what does that translate into a rates increase. So $2.1 million is the additional OPEX expenditure that's required for this current year compared to last. So we're very heavily focused on our operating expenditure.
Mark, I'd just like to thank you for the presentation. It's filled in lots of the squares for me around the rating system. The reality is, for people who are your customers, the ratepayers, when you see these people, poor people who stand to be elected representatives, the one thing that's always at top of mind for people is rates, right? And they don't mean rates; they mean expenditure. You know, so if it was a business which was expanding, you know, you'd be increasing sales. But what it basically means is people are digging deeper into their pockets with limited incomes. So it's a big issue. It's top of mind for people. So that to have this presentation is very helpful, because I feel that as a community we're not really served that well by the local media around local government issues, and we have to take every opportunity we can for this. To hear the Chief Executive's comment about austerity was no surprise to me. We see it day by day in terms of the Council does not practice austerity. But the only group I would say where that would be music to their ears would be the not-for-profit organisations and the community groups whose funding has been reduced over this last year. But to hear that the Council does not believe in austerity, they will love to hear that when you take it out to the community. So, but thank you once again for the presentation.
Yes. You didn't even mention you're having this meeting tonight. Why is that?
So yeah, we have. So Dale, we have been advertising these workshops. We've been advertising that you can attend between 5 and 6:30 p.m. or you can watch online through live streaming.
That, but a lot of people get the local news, not in there.
So just looking to wrap up, but I see Councillor Halliday's got a question. We'll take this as the final question, and then I'm happy to stay behind and take questions offline.
Two things, I think. The first one is, and again, thank you very much for this. Whereabouts, you've made mention this is going to sit on the council website, the recordings and the information. Whereabouts on the site will it sit?
Thank you, Councillor. So, look, I'm not entirely sure. We will obviously have a look at the recording. There may be some slight edits. We've obviously just been doing back to back. So I'm not entirely sure, but we will. We could certainly let councillors, elected members know, and possibly let the public know where it is. We could put it on our website, so it's very clear. If you do wish to see the workshop recording, we'll create some easy navigation towards it. But I think we're just in the process of having these workshops, and then we will look at the recordings and then make them available.
Look, and I just want to say as well, and Dale, this sort of adds to what you're saying as well. I've asked for these over the last few months, so I'm absolutely stoked that they've been provided. And I must admit they've exceeded my expectations with regards to getting an understanding of the intricacies, if you like, of the fiscal side of things. But it's also offered the community a window to get a better understanding as well, which I must admit was a side product of my intent. And I think it's fantastic that they are going to be available. And in regards to what Dale's saying about making the public aware, this hopefully is just a first step with regards to that. And once that information is embedded in the website, then we can spread the word as well that this information is available, and hopefully there'll be other opportunities upcoming in future years to revisit this.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. I'm absolutely certain that our Chief Executive would like more of these, and so this was a start, so thank you.
I think we can go further on this issue, because basically you put those hoardings down there, which is basically a follow-on from my hoarding up in Kapiti. Now, why doesn't the council turn around and have one, when you're putting all your programs up, put it out there so people can see it.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Look, we'll wrap up just because we've got staff. I'm happy to have a further conversation with you. So I'm just going to close. I'm going to close the workshop. For those of you that attended tonight, thank you very much. For our viewers that are live streaming, thank you for tuning in. And this will be the close. I wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you.